Today we get to start our unit on algebraic expressions. This is one of my favorite units that we'll do this year. So hopefully you think it's as fun as I do. Lots of these vocabulary words are going to be new for you, and they're all super important and things you'll need to know for the rest of your math career. So pay close attention, and remember, you have to have this top part filled out in order to get stamped. I have noticed that some of you have gotten lazy and don't write it. You have got to write in the definitions of these terms, so get going on it. Okay, let's talk about them. The first vocabulary word is terms. Now, terms can be three things. First, they could be just a number all by itself. Second, they could be just a variable all by itself. A term can also be a combination of a number and a variable. Okay, so just the number 9, that's a term. Just the letter X, also a term. If you had them together, that is also considered a term. So it's kind of just a chunk of either the equation or the expression, okay? So that's a term. The second one is a coefficient. And a coefficient is the number that's connected to a variable. So like I just wrote 9x over here. 9 is the coefficient because it's that number that's connected to the variable. Alright, and then the variable is the letter in place of an unknown value. That's when we aren't sure what it equals yet. We're solving for that. We don't know what it is, so it's called a variable. It's going to depend, okay? And then a constant is a number by itself. So right here, over when we did the terms, that 9, it's a constant. It never changes. It is always itself. Okay, when you have numbers with variables, that number is going to be influenced by what the variable is doing. But a constant, all by itself, not influenced by a variable, okay? Alright, then down here we've got an expression. An expression is a number sentence without an equal sign. So up here, this example, 5x minus 3, doesn't have an equal sign, so that is considered an expression. An equation, however, does have an equal sign. So if I did equals 28, that now becomes an equation because it has that equal sign. Alright, so that's the difference between an expression and an equation. And then the last two terms I need you to know are numeric expressions. Those only have numbers. Numeric, numbers only. Algebraic expressions have numbers and variables. Okay, algebra has variables, has letters as well. Okay, so that's the difference between those two things. Now let's get into some of the facts that can help us identify terms. Today all we're going to do is practice identifying these vocabulary words, terms, coefficients, constants, and variables in expressions and equations, okay? So the first fact that will help us out is to find the terms by circling the number and or the variable with the sign in front of it. So if I look at the example, 3a plus 18, 3a is a term all by itself, okay? And it's a term because it has a number and a variable connected. And then the positive 18 is a different term, okay, because it is a constant. It's a number all by itself. Okay, so that's what we do. Find terms by circling the number and our variable. Okay, the second fact is a variable alone has a coefficient of 1. Okay, so if I just have x plus 2, x has a coefficient, but it's 1, so we don't write it usually. You don't need to write it because we just understand that if it's by itself, it has a coefficient of 1. And then the third fact is if a number is next to a variable, the number and the unknown variable are being multiplied. We have talked a lot about this already this year. If I have 3a equals 3, we know that the 3 and the a are multiplying, right? When they're right next to each other like that. Okay, so that is the same thing as 3 times a. okay? And that's an important thing to know. All right, so now for our together problems and for your pause and try problems, we're going to practice identifying those different vocabulary words. Okay, so on this first one, we've got 5x plus 13. The first thing I need to do is circle the terms. Okay, this 5x is a term. It's a combination of a number and a letter, a variable. And also this positive 13 or plus 13 also is a term. So down here, I'm going to write my terms are 5x and my second term is 13. Now, if I don't write the positive, you don't need to write the positive because we assume a number is positive if it has no sign. If it's negative, however, you do need to write the negative sign. Okay, so the next thing we're looking for is a coefficient. Remember, the coefficient is the number that is attached to the variable. So we have, right here, our 5x. The 5 is the number attached to the variable, so that is my coefficient. Okay, if you remember from the top, a constant is just a number by itself. So I only have one of those. That 13 right there is all by itself, so it's my constant. And then the last one that I need to know is the variable. Okay, remember the variable is a letter in place of something we don't know. We don't know what x equals. X is my variable. Okay, hopefully that makes sense to you. If you're confused about any of these terms, or if you need to see more examples, come let me know. Let's try this last one together and then you're on your own. Okay, the first thing we're going to do is separate the terms. So 2z, I'm going to stop right there because I have a sign. That sign goes with the next number. And let's stop because I have another sign. Then I have a letter. Then I have the last sign. So in this one we actually have 4 different terms. So I'm going to rewrite that. My terms are 2z, 2, and remember I don't need to write plus 2 because I assume it's positive, y, and 3. There's my 4 terms. Now I'm looking at my coefficients. Remember, the coefficient is the number that's attached to the variable. So this 2 is part of 2z. It's a coefficient. And if you remember, if there is just a variable by itself, it always has a coefficient of 1. So I'm going to list that as well. Third, we're looking for the constants. A constant is a number all by itself. And let's see, I've got 2 of those this time. This 2 is all by itself, and this 3 is all by itself. They will not be influenced by a variable because they're all by itself, therefore they are constant. And the last thing we're looking for is variables. This time I also have 2 variables. I have this z and this y. So I'm going to list those. Now I recommend when you start doing algebra, putting a line through your z's because my z's and my 2's look a lot the same. So if you're like me and your z's and your 2's look similar, I always differentiate that by putting a line through my z like that. Alright, super excited to go into algebra, so go ahead and do those 2 pause and tries. Just the same like we did on the together problem. Separate those, list them out, and we'll check them tomorrow.